My husband suddenly filed for divorce, saying I was a useless wife. It came out of nowhere, a complete blindsiding that shattered my world. One day, I was a happily married woman, planning dinner and discussing our weekend. The next, I was served divorce papers, accompanied by the most cruel and baseless accusation I could have ever imagined. The shock and pain were immense, leaving me questioning everything about my marriage and my own worth. My name is Sarah, and I had been married to Tom for 10 years. 10 years building a life together, sharing dreams, navigating challenges, supporting each other. Our marriage wasn't perfect, no marriage is, but I thought it was strong. We had our routines, our inside jokes, our comfortable silence. We weren't the starry-eyed couple we were when we first met, but I believed we had a deep, quiet love and respect for each other. We talked about the future, about retirement, about growing old together. I had dedicated myself to our home and our life. For the past 5 years, I had been a stay-at-home wife, managing the household, handling the finances, cooking, cleaning, and creating a comfortable, stable environment for us. Before that, I had worked, and we had made the joint decision for me to stay home when my mother became ill and needed care, a role that continued for a while. And then we just decided it worked best for our life for me to manage things at home. I took pride in what I did. I felt like I was contributing equally to our partnership, just in a different way than bringing in a paycheck. I handled all the invisible labor that keeps a household running smoothly. The day it happened started like any other. Tom went to work. I did some grocery shopping, tidied the house, made his favorite dinner. There was no argument, no tense conversation, nothing out of the ordinary. He came home, seemed normal. We ate dinner. It was after dinner, as we were watching TV, that the doorbell rang. It was a process server. They handed me a thick envelope. My hands were shaking as I took it. It was divorce papers, filed by Tom. My husband, sitting just a few feet away, had initiated divorce proceedings without a single word to me. I stared at the papers, then at him, my mind reeling. Tom? What is this? He looked at me, his expression strangely flat, devoid of the warmth I was used to seeing. They're divorce papers, Sarah. But why? We didn't even talk about this. Why would you just file? My voice was trembling, tears already welling up. He sighed, a sound of impatience that cut me to the core. Because there's nothing to talk about. It's over. Over? Just like that? After 10 years? I couldn't breathe. What did I do? What happened? That's when he said it, the words that would echo in my mind, a cruel, twisted epitaph for our marriage. He didn't yell, didn't seem particularly angry, just dismissive. You didn't do anything, Sarah, he said, avoiding my gaze. That's the problem. You just stopped contributing. You're a useless wife. Useless wife. The words hit me like a physical blow. Me? Useless? After dedicating myself to our home, our life, supporting him in countless ways? The shock of the divorce papers was immense, but the pain of that specific accusation, that cruel dismissal of everything I had done, was devastating. I stared at him, the man I had loved and built a life with for a decade, now a stranger delivering a final, brutal insult. The divorce papers lay on the table, concrete, proof that my marriage was over, but his words were the real wound. His words hung in the air between us, heavy with a cruelty I had never heard directed at me before, especially not from Tom. Useless wife. It echoed in my ears, stripping away my breath, my composure, everything. I stared at him, unable to reconcile the man I married with the stranger sitting across the room who had just delivered such a devastating blow. My head was spinning, and the neatly stacked divorce papers on the coffee table felt like a cruel prop in a nightmare. Useless? I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. Tom, how can you say that? After everything? After 10 years? He didn't shout. He didn't look angry. That was the worst part. He just looked done. Resigned. Like this was a simple, logical conclusion. It's just how I feel, Sarah, he said, finally meeting my eyes, but they were cold, distant. You don't work. You don't really do anything that contributes to the household anymore. It's like living with a dependent. Me. Who managed his schedule, paid the bills, kept our home running smoothly, took care of him when he was sick, was his partner, his friend. The accusation felt so fundamentally untrue, so deeply insulting, that it was hard to even grasp. But I manage the house, I protested, scrambling to articulate the invisible labor he was dismissing. I handle the finances, I cook, I clean, I grocery shop, I organize everything. I'm here. Anyone can do that, he said with a shrug. We could hire someone. It's not the same as actually contributing, as being a partner. The divorce papers lay between us, a physical manifestation of his words. I picked them up, my hands shaking. I skimmed the first page. My name, his name, case number. It was real. It was happening. Without a conversation, without a fight, without a single warning. Why now? I asked, tears starting to fall again. Why didn't you say something? If you felt this way, why didn't we talk? Work on it? He stood up then, moving towards the door. There's nothing to talk about, Sarah. I've made up my mind. My lawyer will be in touch. Your lawyer? My voice was incredulous. You're just leaving? After saying that? After serving me with divorce papers out of nowhere? He paused at the door, turning back briefly. His expression was still flat. It's better this way. Less messy. Less messy? Less messy for who? Not for me, whose life had just been detonated. He didn't wait for a response. He just walked out, leaving me alone in the living room of the home we had built together, the home I had dedicated myself to managing, with the cold reality of the divorce papers in my hand, and his cruel words echoing in the sudden silence. Sank onto the couch, the papers fluttering to the floor. The house felt vast and empty. Every object, every picture, every piece of furniture was a reminder of a life, a marriage I thought was solid, now revealed as something he could just discard. The man I loved, my husband of 10 years, had just walked away, declaring me useless. The pain was a physical ache, a crushing weight in my chest that made it hard to breathe. I was alone, blindsided and utterly heartbroken, trying to comprehend how a decade of my life had just been reduced to a single, brutal insult and a stack of legal documents. The hours after Tom walked out were a blur. I don't know how long I sat on the couch, the divorce papers scattered around me. The house was silent, suffocatingly silent, a stark contrast to the turmoil raging inside my head. My home, the place I had poured my energy and identity into, suddenly felt like a hollow shell. Every object seemed to mock me. The clean kitchen he would eat in, the organized living room where we watched TV, the managed finances that kept our life afloat. Useless wife. His words echoed in the emptiness, a cruel counterpoint to all of it. The next few days were a haze of numbness and disbelief. I went through the motions, getting out of bed, showering, staring blankly at the walls. Eating felt impossible. The physical shock hadn't entirely worn off, leaving me feeling fragile and detached from reality. I avoided looking at the divorce papers, as if ignoring them could make them disappear. The accusation, useless wife, was a constant poisonous whisper in my mind. Was it true? Had I really become complacent? Had my contributions become so invisible, so taken for granted that they amounted to nothing in his eyes? I replayed the last few months, searching for clues, for arguments, for something that could explain his sudden change of heart and that specific, brutal insult. There was nothing that seemed proportional to this, against my better judgment. Fueled by a desperate need for a real explanation, I tried contacting Tom. I sent a text asking if we could just talk, rationally, about what happened, about us. His reply was brief and cold. "My lawyer is handling everything now, Sarah. Any communication needs to go through them." It was another brick in the wall he was building between us, cementing the fact that the man I knew was gone, replaced by someone clinical and detached. Gathering the courage to tell my family was incredibly hard. Calling my parents, explaining that Tom had suddenly filed for divorce and why, felt surreal. My mom gasped, then cried, outraged on my behalf. My dad was quiet, his anger palpable even through the phone. "Useless wife?" he repeated, his voice tight. "He has no right to say that. After everything you've done, building a home, taking care of things, he has no idea what goes into that." Their immediate validation, their fierce defense of my worth, was a lifeline. They saw my contributions. They knew I wasn't useless. My sister came over immediately, bringing food and a fierce determination to help. We finally looked at the divorce papers together, deciphering the legal jargon. The grounds for divorce were boilerplate, irreconcilable, differences, but Tom's cruel commentary had given them a specific, painful meaning. The reality of the legal battle ahead, the division of assets, the unwinding of a decade-long life, was terrifying. But having my family and close friends rally around me made a world of difference. Their shock mirrored my own, but their support gave me strength. They helped me find a lawyer, promising to help with fees if needed. They listened as I cried, raged, and repeated the bewildering events. The pain was still immense. The confusion lingered, and the sting of useless wife hadn't faded. But surrounded by their love and support, and with the first steps towards legal counsel taken, the numbness began to recede, replaced by a growing resolve. Tom might have walked away and called me useless, but I wasn't, and I was going to face this head-on. Getting a lawyer felt like stepping into a different world. The office was quiet, formal, and the conversation was clinical, focusing on dates, assets, and legal strategy, rather than the decade of my life that was being dismantled. My lawyer, a kind but no-nonsense woman named Attorney Davies, listened patiently as I recounted the bizarre circumstances, the sudden papers, Tom's cold departure, the useless wife comment. She was immediately outraged by his behavior, which was validating. His personal opinion of your role, however cruel, doesn't dictate your legal rights, Sarah, she assured me. Especially in a 10-year marriage where you maintain the home. Your contributions have significant value. Hearing her say that, in a professional context, began to push back against the insidious, useless label Tom had tried to brand me, with not navigating the legal process was emotionally draining and brought the harsh financial realities of the situation to the forefront. As a stay-at-home wife, my access to funds was tied up in joint accounts, now potentially contested assets. Attorney Davies explained the process of asset division, spousal support, and gathering financial documentation. Discussing our shared savings, the value of our home, everything we had built together, felt surreal and painful, like dissecting a deceased body. Tom's cruel comment about my lack of financial contribution was a constant, bitter undercurrent to these discussions. Communication with Tom was now strictly through lawyers. It was impersonal, cold, and filled with legal jargon. His stance, as conveyed through his lawyer, mirrored his initial dismissal of my role. He seemed determined to minimize my contributions and potentially limit any spousal support. It felt like a continuation of his insult, trying to devalue me financially as well as personally. Each letter, each email between the legal teams, was a painful reminder that the man I loved saw me not as a partner, but as someone disposable. The emotional toll was immense. Some days I felt strong and determined to fight for a fair outcome. Other days I was overwhelmed by sadness and exhaustion, wanting it all to just disappear. The stress made it hard to sleep, hard to eat. Yet, the support from my family and friends remained unwavering. They checked in constantly, brought meals, listened, and reminded me that I was capable and deserving. My sister even started a spreadsheet to help me track documentation needed for the lawyer, a practical task that felt like a lifeline in the emotional chaos. As the legal back and forth continued, questions about Tom's true motives resurfaced. Was it just about money? Was there someone else? Attorney Davies mentioned that sometimes a sudden divorce and cruel behavior can signal a midlife crisis or a desire for a completely different life, discarding the old one without looking back. But without communication directly with Tom, it was all speculation, adding another layer of confusion to the pain. His coldness and the specific useless wife insult, however, felt deeply personal, more than just a general desire to leave. Receiving a legal document from Tom's lawyer outlining their position on asset division, which significantly undervalued my years of managing the home and his career, was particularly difficult. It felt like a formal declaration that my work, my contributions, my very identity as a wife were, in his eyes, worthless. But looking at the document, the wave of pain was quickly followed by a surge of defiance. He wanted to call me useless and discard me. I would show him, and myself, just how wrong he was. This wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about asserting my worth and fighting for the fair treatment I deserved after a decade of partnership, even if he no longer saw it that way. The battle was far from over, but I was ready to fight. The initial shock had worn off, but the legal battle that followed was its own kind of relentless pain. Attorney Davies was a fierce advocate, but navigating the complexities of divorce law, especially when dealing with someone determined to minimize your worth, was emotionally taxing. Tom, through his lawyer, maintained his position that my contributions as a stay-at-home wife were minimal and did not warrant a significant share of the assets we had accumulated during our decade-long marriage. It felt like his useless wife comment wasn't just a moment of cruelty, but a calculated strategy to devalue me legally. His legal filings outlined a version of our marriage where his career was the sole engine of our financial success, and my role at home was merely that of someone who benefited from his hard work without contributing anything of real value. It twisted my reality, portraying me as a dependent rather than a partner who had enabled his career by managing every aspect of our home life. Reading his lawyer's arguments felt like being punched in the gut, a constant echo of his cruel words. But, with each filing from his side, my resolve hardened. Attorney Davies encouraged me to document everything. We started building a comprehensive picture of my contributions. Not just cooking and cleaning, but managing our household budget, paying bills, coordinating maintenance and renovations, planning, and executing social events that supported his professional network, providing emotional support during stressful periods of his career, taking care of family matters that allowed him to focus on work. It was a painstaking process, going through old calendars, emails, bank statements, piecing together the invisible labor of a decade. This process of documentation became surprisingly empowering. It wasn't just about the legal case, it was about reclaiming my own narrative. Every item I listed was a silent refutation of his useless label. Managing a household isn't doing nothing. It's work. It requires time, skill, and energy. Seeing it all laid out on paper, concrete and undeniable, was a powerful reminder of my value, independent of Tom's opinion. My family and friends were incredible during this phase. They helped me gather information, brainstorm examples of my contributions, and provided much-needed emotional support after difficult interactions with the legal process. They reminded me of specific instances where my management or support had directly benefited Tom or our lives. Their belief in my worth was a shield against his attempts to diminish it. Through the legal back and forth, subtle clues about Tom's motives, beyond just seemingly wanting a different life, started to emerge. There were hints about financial pressures at his company or potential changes in his career that he hadn't discussed with me. It felt like he was trying to shed responsibilities, including me and the life we had built, perhaps for financial reasons or to pursue a different path he felt I wouldn't fit into. The useless wife comment might have been a cruel rationalization for him, a way to justify abandoning me in our shared life without acknowledging his own issues or desires. The legal fight was draining, stressful, and often felt deeply unfair. Dealing with Tom's attempts to legally erase my contributions was a constant emotional battle. But as Chapter 5 drew to a close, I wasn't just reacting to his moves. I was actively building my case, documenting my worth, and fighting for the future I deserved. The pain was still present, but it was intertwined with a growing sense of strength and a clear determination to not let his cruelty define the end of my marriage or my sense of self. The fight was far from over, but I was armed with the truth of my own value, and that was a powerful weapon. The legal battle wasn't a swift, clean fight. It was a protracted, grinding process that felt designed to wear me down. Tom's side continued to challenge the value of my non-monetary contributions, making arguments that felt like direct echoes of his useless wife comment in legal speak. There were delays, demands for excessive documentation, and constant negotiations that felt like pulling teeth. Every email from my lawyer detailing the latest back and forth brought a fresh wave of stress and resurrected the initial pain. The emotional roller coaster was relentless. Some days I felt like I could handle anything, ready to fight for every dollar I deserved. Other days, I was a weeping mess, questioning if it was all worth it, if I should just give in to make it stop. The stress manifested physically. Headaches, difficulty sleeping, a constant knot in my stomach. It was hard to focus on anything else when the future of my financial security and the validation of my worth felt like they were constantly on trial. Yet the fight itself became a strange source of strength. Every time I worked with attorney Davies to compile more evidence of my contributions, the years I spent managing our complex household budget, the events I organized that benefited Tom's career, the countless hours I dedicated to making our house a home, I felt a surge of defiant pride. I wasn't useless. I was essential. The act of systematically documenting my work was an act of reclaiming my own narrative from his cruel dismissal. An unexpected source of validation came from an old friend, someone I hadn't seen in a while, who had heard about the divorce. When I hesitantly explained some of what Tom had said, her reaction was immediate and fierce. "Useless? Sarah, are you kidding me? You basically ran that man's entire personal life while he was focused on his career. He wouldn't have gotten half as far without you managing everything back home." Her genuine outrage and clear recognition of my value were incredibly powerful, a reminder that Tom's warped perspective wasn't shared by those who knew us. There were small victories that helped keep me going. A favorable ruling on a minor motion, Attorney Davies successfully pushing back against one of Tom's more unreasonable demands, felt like tiny wins in a long war. But the most significant victories were personal. Successfully navigating a complicated issue with the house that Tom would have usually handled, managing a personal financial matter on my own, or simply having a day where I didn't cry and actually felt happy for a few hours. These were the moments that proved my resilience and growing independence. I also started taking tentative steps towards rebuilding my identity outside of the marriage. I attended a few local workshops related to skills I had used in managing the home, starting to think about potential career paths or ways to use my organizational talents professionally. It was scary, stepping into the unknown after a decade of being defined as Tom's wife and stay at home. But it was also exhilarating. I was rediscovering parts of myself that had been dormant. As Chapter 6 concluded, the legal battle with Tom was still ongoing, a cloud of stress hanging over me. His attempts to minimize my worth in court were painful and frustrating. But I was no longer the shattered woman who received divorce papers out of the blue. I was a woman in the fight, armed with documentation, supported by loved ones, and slowly, but surely rebuilding her sense of self. The road ahead was still challenging, but I was walking it with a growing sense of determination and a clear understanding that my value was inherent, not dependent on a husband's cruel and baseless accusation. Mediation was a difficult turning point, bringing me face to face with the reality of Tom's position, but it also solidified my resolve. The divorce case didn't settle immediately after mediation. There were more negotiations, more filings, and the slow, arduous process continued. But with Attorney Davies fighting fiercely on my behalf, armed with the detailed documentation of my contributions, we built a strong case. Eventually, the case reached a point where settlement became the more favorable option for both sides, avoiding a potentially lengthy and public trial. The final divorce decree wasn't exactly what I would have envisioned for the end of my marriage, but it was fair. The assets were divided equitably, recognizing the value of my decade of managing our home and supporting Tom's career. It was a legal validation of my worth, a professional acknowledgement that being a stay-at-home wife was a significant contribution to our shared life, directly refuting Tom's cruel accusation. Life after the divorce was finalized felt like starting over, but this time, I wasn't the same woman who received those papers on a normal evening. I was living in a smaller but comfortable apartment that was entirely mine. I had secured a job utilizing the organizational and management skills I had honed over the years, skills Tom had dismissed as doing nothing. It was challenging, building a new career in my 40s, but it was also incredibly rewarding. I was supporting myself, standing on my own 2 feet, proving my capability every single day. The phrase useless wife still sometimes floats into my mind, but it no longer holds power over me. It's a hollow echo from a past life, a testament to Tom's own limitations and cruelty, not a reflection of who I am. The process of documenting my contributions for the divorce wasn't just a legal task. It was a personal journey of reclaiming my narrative and affirming my value. I know definitively that I was not useless. I was a dedicated partner, a capable home manager, and a woman of substance. Looking back at the marriage and Tom's sudden departure, I still don't have a perfect explanation for his actions or his cruel words. Perhaps it was a midlife crisis, perhaps financial pressure, perhaps he simply fell out of love and used a cruel excuse to justify his exit without facing the complexity of it. His coldness during the divorce process confirmed that the man I knew had been replaced by a stranger, and I've accepted that I may never fully understand why he chose to end things that way. But his choice was about him, not a failing on my part. My worth was never dependent on his opinion, only I didn't fully realize it until he forced me to find it. The lessons learned from this painful chapter are etched into my being. I learned the devastating impact of cruel words, the importance of financial independence, and the strength that comes from within when you're forced to stand up for yourself. I learned that the end of one path isn't the end of the journey, but simply a turn onto a new one. Now, my life is mine. I have a supportive network of family and friends, a career I'm building, and a quiet confidence that comes from having weathered a storm and emerged stronger. The pain of the divorce is a part of my history, but my future is a blank page, and I'm excited to write the next chapter, knowing my worth, my capabilities, and my resilience. I am far from useless. I am a woman who rebuilt her life on her own terms, and that is a powerful and beautiful thing.